take over from here.
Currently working? Yeah, you could. This is our first attempt at this, and this is something we plan to do annually, and we want it to be meaningful and productive. So we are requesting candid feedback that certain parts of it were inappropriate and they bored you, weren't enough depth. I don't think we're going to get not enough depth feedback. But things that we feel like we should do better, expand on, do differently, don't cover that in so much detail because it's either obvious or it's just inappropriate. All the good feedback you can give us, we'd appreciate. You can do it. You can make notes and hand notes in at the end. You can stop us midstream, ask questions. It's a workshop format, so it's very informal. We've divided it into each department head is going to kind of review their area of operation. And then starting with the city manager's perspective, and then followed by the city clerk and then the city attorney. The city attorney will actually be participating in some of our staff reviews when we get into the planning department where the city attorney is heavily involved, or public records of the city clerk. Again, the city attorney is very involved in those areas. So, so we're going to get started. Just prior to starting, we've prepared a Newberry 101 manual, one for each elected official, and just the contents of that, and these are to take with you, are we put the city charter in there. We've got the rules of procedure for the city commission that I don't know when they were last adopted, but they are re-adopted from time to time. There's some information about sunshine law and public records law, Florida law related to those things. There's a copy of the city budget. There's guidelines for how quasi-judicial hearings work. There's a Robert's Rules of Order and a cheat sheet, although I've learned recently that we may not be following Robert's Rules of Order. We may be following Alice Sturgis's Rules of Order. So as we learn about that, we may have some commentary on that at some point in the future. The city's public records policy. Forms 6 and 8B are under tab 9, and they have to do with public disclosures, those types of things that all elected officials have to turn in annually, and some staff. If you're sitting on the Planning and Zoning Board, you may have already been completing those. And then a copy of today's PowerPoint presentation. And we are going to post all this. It's on YouTube now, and we're going to post it all for anybody in Newberry that's having troubles with insomnia. This is staff's, just our commitment to service to helping those folks out as well. So that's the handout. And then we'll launch into a presentation. So some quick facts about Newberry, and we're also working on our presentation skills. So we're not going to read every slide. We're going to maybe hit some high points. And
all these are in here?
They are under tab 10. So if you want to pull that out and take notes, that would be fine with us. So, but these are some quick facts that just talk about one of the things that is unique to Newberry is for a city our size with a population of just under 6,000, we do provide a higher level offering for services than most cities with our population. You see, we also have a larger than typical budget that generally is related to the fact that we provide our own municipal service, electric service, and that's a pretty healthy budget. It's in the $4 million a year range all by its lone self. So some interesting facts that 54 square miles, we're the 18th or 19th largest city in the state of Florida. That's a point of pride for elected officials. Nobody can say you're from a small town. And at a population that grew about 600 residents just in the last year, we are likely the fastest, unverified, fastest growing city in the state of Florida. But since 2010, we are confirmed the third fastest growing city in the state of Florida. Since 2010, since the last census. Last year, we jumped 10%. We think that probably makes us the fastest growing in the state. We're going to run that down one of these days. And of course, you know, we have a commission, manager, form of government. So here's our org chart. It shows that citizens, of course, are at the top. We have below the mayor and commission, you all have 3 direct reports: city attorney, city manager, city clerk. And then underneath the city manager, we have 6 major departments. So here's an organizational chart. It's an abridged org chart for the areas of responsibility that I oversee. And again, it's stuff you're all familiar with. All of these areas are represented tonight, and we'll be giving you presentations. So these are the powers and duties that the charter affords to the city manager position, and make sure I get them all on there. And we're going to spend in-depth discussion about each of them. Now, generally, I take direction from the city commission. I'm charged with administering the municipal operations. You guys set policy. I administer policy, or this department administers policy. We enforce the laws, ordinances, and policies. And the charter requires me to attend all meetings, but it's very specific that I'm not allowed to vote. So that's the best way for it to be. I'm responsible for personnel, hiring and firing, and preparing a budget. Our operational priorities as day-to-day operations start with, to me, providing an elite level of service in all operating areas. There are no exceptions to that. We are closer to elite in some areas than other, but we will never strive for anything less. Even great's not going to get it. It's got to be elite. We talk about Disney level of service, Publix level of service. If you can think of it as being excellence in service, that's who we want to be. We also believe in government. Government is just full of process. Most of the process is born from something, some regulations that we're required to meet. But we're really trying to listen to what our customers' concerns are, and not blow them away with all the process that we know and all the things that we know. And we're trying to hear what their problems are and assist them. We make a priority out of having lower than average costs for our services, whether it's utility services, our fees and charges, or utility rates. Just in the last year, wholesale power, law enforcement are areas that we've been able to work with the commission and bring back meaningful savings to our residents, significant savings. And we see as a priority developing a strong employment base in our community. We have demonstrated that we are great for attracting residential development, and what will follow residential development will be just commercial service industry. You're going to get your banks and your restaurants where people are living, but a strong employment base here. Alachua County is not known for manufacturing or blue collar agricultural. We have those roots, and we embrace that, and we're efforting to bring that to Newberry. Special projects, and I'm not particularly specific with these. These are things that the commission have directed us to look into. There's always a concern about our infrastructure, whether it's making sure our existing assets are not being run into the ground, that we're maintaining them, and that we're planning appropriately for growth. This commission has directed us to be as technology friendly as we can be without falling over the bleeding edge of technology. So we're looking at some things that will automate process and make life better for our citizens, and then just quality of life issues, things like revitalizing our downtown with the implementation of a community redevelopment agency if we can get that through the Florida legislature this year, enhancing broadband opportunities, having more community engagements and events, trying to utilize social media, have a friendlier face, and bringing natural gas service would just add to an alternative source of fuel, heat, power for our residents and at a lower cost.
And Mike, some of these, can you go back one slide?
Absolutely.
Some of these are, I like the title special projects, because some of these are we could do, we don't have to do. Some of them, like the SCADA or SCADA. SCADA. What does SCADA stand for?
Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition.
That's not really a special project. That's more of a must-have, but has just come on us sooner than we thought. But we do have a choice there, but it's not a very good choice. It's pretty much we just need to go ahead and do it. Things like, the infrastructure needs are fairly pressing. Broadband, natural gas service, those are things we were looking at that could more aptly fall under special projects. So some of these things we're going to be talking about very much in the budget season as, hey, we don't really have a choice, we got to do this. Most of those things that we got to do, we do have some funding sources there. The rest of these are things that will be open for debate, and some commissioners have already taken stances on them to support, and some are against. But I wanted to point out particularly the SCADA. I get it right again?
Absolutely.
SCADA as one that's probably wouldn't be under a special projects because it's pretty dire.
There are.
In order to be for, against, or whatever, I don't even know, I'm not familiar with the GIS asset mapping much and the advanced metering infrastructure, so I will only be able to.
It's a long way to go. Yeah. More workshops in the near future.
It's incumbent upon staff to provide great background and to be available to answer questions even before commission meeting. To the mayor's point, SCADA, elements of SCADA are a critical part of our operations now, and we can't really do without. Other elements of SCADA have more of an optional flair to them, but are along the lines of technologies coming down the pipes, and we want to take advantage of what we can. To the mayor's point about the quality of life issues, when we are looking at bringing broadband opportunities or natural gas opportunities to Newberry, that doesn't mean that staff is suggesting that the city will provide those services. It just means that we hear a chronic request from our community to have enhanced broadband services or cheaper fuel supplies. And so, like with the Natural Gas Service, the Commission directed us to solicit RFPs to have a private company come in and do that through a franchise agreement. So we're working on that. Broadband, we're evaluating several alternatives. One might include the city providing the services, but more likely is these are the people in our region that provide that service, and we would entice them to come in and increase their level of service. So next I'll move on to fire and introduce our Fire Chief, Ben Buckner.
Is everybody going to get this, or just the fire department?
It'd be happy
for me. All right. Good evening, Mayor and Madam Commissioner. Ben Buckner, Fire Chief. We'll go ahead and this is our organizational chart within the fire department. As you can see, we have 13 full-time employees. We have one other supervisory employee, other than myself, that's a senior lieutenant who oversees the other lieutenants and additional employees, full-time and part-time employees within the department. We currently have, what you don't see on there, they would be along the line of the firefighters at the bottom. We do have 5 part-time firefighters that we use for vacancies, for vacation or sick time.
In addition to those 6?
Yes, ma'am. The 5, those are all full-time positions. We staff, and we'll get to that in just a second, but we use our part-timers to fill in for leave time and things of that nature. All right, the demographics. Okay. This is what our staffing looks like every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have 1 lieutenant, a driver, a firefighter, EMT, and a firefighter paramedic. Personnel qualifications for the lieutenant and driver exceed our partner agencies i.e. GFR, Alachua County. In other words, we require more of our personnel to get into those positions than those other two larger departments do. We also exceed High Springs, Micanopy's, and La Crosse's. Recently, we've been working, it's been a little over a year, we've been working on getting people to where they can work what's known as working out of class. In other words, a driver-operator can meet qualifications to work out of class as a lieutenant. The goal of that was to obviously have better trained personnel to provide a better service to the citizens we serve, but it was also somewhat two-pronged to help alleviate some of the overtime. And so far, it's going in the right direction.
How does that help alleviate the overtime? Because you've got another person to bring in.
We have
to work
somebody
that
that is on that shift. If a lieutenant takes off for vacation or sick or for whatever reason they're off, if we have a driver or another firefighter that can work in that classification and we're able to bump people up, then we're hiring that part-time person to fill that spot, which is a lot less cost than paying
A lieutenant's
paying the overtime.
And
Some additional demographics. We've had, as you saw earlier, we have in our staffing levels, our daily staffing levels, we have one lieutenant, a driver, firefighter EMT, and a firefighter paramedic. That paramedic is through an exchange program that's been in effect since 2000 with Alachua County Fire Rescue. Allows us to provide initial response ALS to our coverage area. There are some things coming down the pipe where we're going to look at potentially getting our own paramedics in the future as well. This is something I'm pretty proud of. It's a citywide effort, not just the fire department, because a lot of some of what ISO evaluates, which is the Insurance Services Office, this is how your homeowner's insurance and your business insurance is created and how you're rated. We're in the top 6% nationally based on the 2014 data, which was the last time the city actually received their ISO classification.
What kind of criteria do you use to make it so good?
They use a lot. There's a 100 some odd page, it seems like a 100-page report, but water system, it helped us when the second water tower was put in several years ago. That helped. Apparatus, the training of your employees. When we got the Quint back in 1999, that one truck alone gave us a little bit better rating back then. But there's a lot of factors: personnel training, the apparatus, the equipment you have on the apparatus, your hose testing, your annual ladder testing. They look at all those things. Your water supply, and that's why I said it was kind of a citywide endeavor, because they don't just come in and look at the fire department. They look at your municipal water supply as well. Our annual budget's in the neighborhood of $1.25 million. That includes capital, which we've had quite a bit of capital over the last couple of years with apparatus and vehicles, and of course the station expansion. The revenue streams that we have, that's two of the, I believe there's two additional ones that are very small revenue streams, but those are our biggest revenue streams other than the general fund. We were able to, the city manager and I were able to get an increase of about $30,000 from our contract with Alachua County last year. And that was a 3-year contract, so that 175 is for this current fiscal year, next fiscal year, and then it goes to 185 in year 3.
You said some comes out of the general fund too? You get some?
The general fund, there's some of our budget comes out of the general fund too. I believe it's in the neighborhood of about $600,000. It was actually
Whatever would make up the difference.
Yes, ma'am.
And by law, that has to happen. So you can't fund the entire fire department out of the fire assessment fee. Are you going to speak to that relationship?
I wasn't going to get into that.
It's complicated, but it is controversial, and you'll hear the debate during the budget. Some of the commissioners completely hate the fire assessment fee. What is our fire assessment fee right now?
It's $150 per resident. And then it's so much a square foot for institutional property, commercial, and so forth.
Okay.
And it varies on the type of occupancy classification in the commercial side.
But just know if at the end of the day we need one and a quarter.
Okay.
So if you do away with the fire assessment, then it all has to come out of property taxes. And some people, when you get into property taxes, well, some people don't pay as much as other people. So the fire assessment at least levelizes, everybody pays something into the fire. And that contract, I'll just point you back to the partnership that we have where, who do we trade to the county? We trade a fire.
We trade one of the full-time, one of the 6 firefighters you saw in the organizational chart. We trade one of those firefighter EMTs to Alachua County every day for a firefighter paramedic.
And that allows us to send a paramedic. So it's part of our wonderful working relationship with the county that we have that relationship. That allows us to start immediately working on somebody while we wait for the ambulance to get there.
Just a note on the fire assessment. We do a study through Government Services Group, GSG, and they figure out the legal amount that we're allowed to charge to recoup. You're not allowed to use fire assessment to pay for basic life services, life support services. In additional to the fire, to that part of the fire assessment, the commission authorized the issuance of debt this year to expand and renovate the fire station, with the intention that we would, the commission would raise the fire assessment to pay for that debt.
And to kind of clarify what Dallas was saying on the assessment, basically the way to look at it is if it's EMS-based, emergency medical services, it can't be paid for out of fire assessment. All right, goals and areas of focus. Obviously, we'd like to get the fire station expansion complete. It's moving along nicely over the last week and a half. Realize the placement of the ambulance in that station, hopefully, or at least within the municipal limits of the city. That's obviously a Alachua County Fire Rescue call as to when that'll happen and where they'll place it. Be a cost benefit to them to not place it anywhere but there, in our opinion, but that's that again is their call.
Where's the closest one now?
Look, our closest ambulance, if they're in station, is 9.3 miles away, which is in Jonesville. It's at Station 17 over by 39th Avenue and 241, 143rd Street. So there's a fire services master plan that addresses these kinds of items. They've already done one of the items on the fire rescue master plan, and it looks like they're going to attempt to start doing some more, and that puts us in a pretty good position if they follow through with the master plan. Well, obviously, we want to continue providing the highest level of service through professionalism, cost effectiveness, and efficiency, and realizing that the investment that the citizens have made in the fire department, the fire and EMS service, and being good stewards of that money.
Ben, can I, it's a leading question, but it comes up quite a bit in the community with newly elected officials. It's back to the ambulance. The city of Newberry, can we start our own ambulance service?
No. The state of Florida, state statute regulates and specifies who can provide transport services, ambulance transport services within the state of Florida, and it's given to the counties. Now the counties can relinquish that, what's called a certificate of need. That's the abbreviated version of it. It's called a certificate of need. That's given to the counties by state statute. The municipalities don't have a right, and they can't provide ambulance service within their counties unless the county grants them that right. It's been attempted by several departments within Alachua County, a couple departments in Alachua County over the years, and it just doesn't go anywhere. And if you think about it, the ambulances, the transport fees are kind of the money pot of the fire and EMS service. Right now, Alachua County holds that certificate of need. I don't foresee them giving that up. So it's not a, well, we'll just do our own. Unfortunately, we can't really do things that way right now. And the final item on the goals and areas of focus, we've been working on an apparatus and major equipment replacement plan through our CIP, and you know, that's just one of those things. For years it was one of the things that we had as you can remember, and I'm sure the mayor can as well, and we had some aging apparatus. Back in the early 90s, 1967 and 77 was our newest truck. So in order to keep up with today's standards and, you know, the fleet requirements that are established, we need to keep that apparatus and major equipment replacement plan in place, and we tend to get all the goodie out of most of our equipment, and you know, that's something that we're going to continue to do.
And Ben, can you explain just a little bit why the county pays us $175,000 a
Sure.
year?
And this map will kind of spell some of that out for us. This is what's called our first response territory, our initial response territory. If you look at the blue, you see where it says Station 28. That's the fire station. That's our station. And if you go to the first red line that you come to in each direction, that is our initial response area. And we cover 64 square miles. We have the, I believe it's the highest. It may be the second highest coverage area in the county, but I believe it's the highest now. That area, the blue is the municipal limits of the city of Newberry. Anything that's in white in that first initial response area is the Alachua County properties. So essentially that $175,000 Alachua County is providing to the city in exchange for us providing fire and EMS services to those white areas. And I will mention, it's not just within those white areas, just within that boundary. That other red dot you see in the top right-hand corner, that's Station 17 in Jonesville. If they were on another call and we were in station, but we were the closest unit, we would go outside of our boundary to respond to that call. The county dispatches on what's known as closest unit response.
They would do the same for us?
And they do the same for us. And we do have a part of our agreement with them for that 175,000 is a automatic aid, mutual aid agreement. There are circumstances when we would pay Alachua County to come into the city with a reciprocity agreement. And essentially just how that works, if we're on another call in any of those blue areas in our first run, and they have to come into the city of Newberry in any of those blue areas, we owe them for that call.
It's an
it's-
interesting agreement that we have.
Yeah, it's an interesting agreement, and it's
agreement in
it's a
progress.
minimal amount of money. I think last year we ended up paying right around just over $7,000 for the reciprocity calls. After the manager and I met with the county and negotiated the agreement, and of course with the city attorney's office, one of the things that we were able to do is the price stayed the same, but how the billing occurred and when they were actually allowed to bill changed. So it reduced the call numbers that they can bill for. But we do cover quite a bit of area. 64 square miles is a decent sized coverage area. All right, these are our response statistics, and I will tell you these response statistics, when we were preparing for this, these cover April 1st of 2016 through 3/31 of 17. So that's a full year. That's the type of call and the number of calls, and as you can see, the majority of our calls are EMS calls. And that's just not limited to Newberry. That's pretty much fire service wide nowadays, because everybody has become cross-trained. Most everybody has become cross-trained, and they're responding to every type of call you can think of. You see hazmat calls, we respond to hazmat calls, obviously fires, smoke removal, unauthorized burning. I mean, any major medical or any emergency call that you can think of, we would respond to.
They're excellent at grass fires, let me tell you. You need to put out a grass fire, and they will take care of you.
We got you covered.
That-
And that's it.
That's what residents tell us, right?
Yeah.
Any questions?
Great, thank you.
Next is Jamie Jones. He's our Utility and Public Works Director.
Good evening. See if I can make this function correctly.
Those are, you can snatch them out.
They have a wonderful cascading effect. They have been practicing their
done.
PowerPoints
Did you
today.
do that?
No, I didn't. They've been practicing their PowerPoints here today. This is a brief overview of the organizational structure, public works and utilities. There's myself and two staff assistants, and the electric system supervisor, public works supervisor, water, wastewater, and utility system technician, and then the employees within each of those divisions. The Utility and Public Works Administration is basically an internal service fund to the utility departments. We coordinate all their work and assist them in the administration of their daily duties. The two staff assistants and myself, they enter all the work orders and do the data entry related to the operations of the department. As it states here, anything from utility locates to coordinating cemetery lot purchases and locates in the cemetery, mosquito control complaints, solid waste complaints, things of that nature.
The road maintenance, you do that too?
Yes, ma'am. We also assist in all the purchasing requirements for each of those departments, and that in itself can be quite a chore to ensure that we have all the materials and supplies readily available, not only for normal operations but for emergencies. And we also work with the planning department, the building department on new development as it relates to construction of utilities and right-of-way improvements in those developments or any other contracted utility work within the city limits. And we also deal with the regulatory agencies such as FDEP, FDOT, and the Public Service Commission, generate reports for Florida Municipal Power Association and FMEA.
A lot of those special projects that we looked at could significantly change, not the fact that those operations would happen, but the GIS, the smart meter technology could certainly help make a lot of those bullet points more efficient, more professional, get us up to speed. So when we talk about those special projects, we'll be thinking back to these, what they're trying to get done.
Brief overview now of your electric department. As it states, we're a member of the Florida Municipal Power Association and Florida Municipal Electric Association. We're one of 34 electric providers, municipal electric providers in the state. Give you an idea of our feed system, I'm sure you've heard a good bit of discussion about that we're fed in from the west on State Road 26. Our power is wheeled through Duke Energy and comes in and splits into different feeders within the city limits. Statistics about our overhead, underground conductor, on the utility poles, different infrastructure within the electric system. All of those components have life cycles and testing requirements and maintenance requirements, so we have to follow up on a regular basis, and we have to report a lot of that to the state. Annual budget, $4.1 million approximately, and 1,900 active electric meters.
And Jamie, can we opt out of being part of FMPA?
There is an opt-out process, but it's a long notice requirement. I believe it's 30 years. Is that correct, Mike?
And the reason behind that is that we're not just a purchaser of power from them, we're an owner. And so whenever they went out and solicited bonds to build power plants and get into long-term contracts, we signed along with that. So the average life of a municipal bond for the power industries is 30 years, and so that's why they have to plan for your exit and make sure that you've paid off everything that you obligated yourself to.
And Jamie is the.
I've never heard of that. I always heard it was 30 years, but I didn't understand why.
What did they come up with? The city that wants out. What do they have to pay to get out? Immediately.
Too much.
34 million, 64 million, something like that.
Something.
I don't know the number off of the top of my head. I've actually, they've been under a lot of turmoil. The state, a lot of state legislatures been after FMPA, and one of the things the state wanted to see is that you should give every member the number to what it would cost if you want to just write a check and get out. And from their position is that when you go to retire power plants and nuclear power plants, which we own a portion of, there are so many unknowns, there's so much unknown risk, it's unfair to try to give someone a true number. But they've done their best. Our number, I believe, if we were to get out, would cost us, just in a 30-year debt service, is about $30 per customer per month. So the only time that would be cost effective for us is if we go find ourselves a power deal that's $31 a megawatt hour cheaper than our current deal. And our current deal is not ideal, but there's not $31 better. So I think the option for us to say, yeah, we'll take out a big fat loan and pay that over 30 years is just not really there for us now.
Yes, I mean, comparatively, how bad is it? I mean, with FMPA, it's not that bad, is it?
In the last 4 or 5 years, we've made great strides in reducing. Our power is mostly generated, the power that FMPA sells is mostly generated through natural gas. Natural gas prices have been really low since 2009, 2010. So we've been getting the benefit of that. The problem is that if natural gas goes up $1 per million BTUs, it's a $7 megawatt impact our customers. So we're extremely sensitive. So as long as natural gas prices stay low, we're going to be in the hunt. We average, our average bill is about $80 a megawatt hour. The market today is about $58. So there's about $25 left on the table for the market, and FMPA's average is about $71. So we're still about $10 over the average for most of our other members, and we are working on bringing that closer to, we want to pay closer to the average than be an outlier like we've been. And former mayor, Bill Conrad, is now contracted with this board to be the representative for FMPA, has really been championing that cost levelization or neutralization at the board level. And we've had some recent successes.
How long can he stay there to do that?
Until this board decides otherwise.
Then you whatever you want to do.
He just has to be a paid member of the city of Newberry, right? Can you go back one slide?
So we just pay him to be on the board.
That's correct.
Correct. We pay him a monthly stipend.
And as Mike said, that is a extremely complicated contract, and it's not just about the power you use, but having availability of resources for your peak demand or potential peak demand.
Jamie, can you speak to one of the things that elected officials deal with a lot is the power blips, and people complain about the power blips. What of all of these things that are way above our knowledge base are the cause of the power blips? Is it the fact that we just have the one main feeder into town? Is it old reclosers? Is it limbs on the...
We had a distribution reliability study where we had some experts in the industry come in and take a look at what we do and how our system's set up. One of the issues we have, as you see there, identified 5 reclosures. That's an automatic acting device. It basically works like a circuit breaker. If you have something that contacts the circuit that's a fault, it basically kicks out long enough for that fault to try to clear. And then it resets itself. It attempts to do that 3 times. The 3rd time, if the fault hasn't cleared, then it locks itself out and somebody has to manually go and reset it. And the causes of those kind of things could be anything from a limb touching the line, a squirrel hitting 2 points on the line. There's a multitude of small issues that could cause that. The blip is actually a piece of equipment that is trying to protect the system as a whole. The blip is not necessarily a bad thing. It's the system trying to repair itself. Unfortunately, occasionally it does lock out and you have to address that. We are doing a lot of things with vegetation management, with installing squirrel guards, with improving our infrastructure and the way that we switch and operate it and link it to prevent that as much as possible. In the past, I believe that Newberry and electric providers as a whole have always had a certain amount of those momentary interruptions. In today's time, most of your equipment is much more sensitive than it used to be, and a lot of it has clocks. 30 years ago, very few things in your house did you have something that would indicate that you'd had a momentary blip. Now every device has something that indicates you had a momentary blip. I think a lot of that is to do with the proactive vegetation management, and there was some
Be all the time.
readjustment of the sensitivity of some of those reclosures, but the fact that it tries to reset itself is the system trying to heal the problem. Some pictures of our electric staff performing some of their daily duties. That's 4 of the 5 members of our electric staff. Now we'll go into the potable water, a brief overview on that. We do have 4 production wells, 2 located out at the Easton complex, 2 located at the city yard complex. We have an elevated tank in the middle of town, an elevated tank at Easton that provides the stabilizing pressure source for the city and also fire suppression capabilities. Approximately 2,000 active water meters. We don't have a footage yet on the water system pipeline. We're trying to get an accurate inventory and determine that. We produce approximately 190 million gallons of potable water annually. Per our FDP operating permit, and it depends on the amount of water you produce and the type treatment you have staffing requirements where you have to have certain classifications of licensed operators in the water and the wastewater system. And just for example, our water system requires that it be monitored and visited at least once a day, 7 days a week, by a licensed operator Class C or higher. Our water and wastewater personnel is a combined department. They're responsible for both.
Jamie, are we currently making money in water, losing money in water, breaking even in water?
We're in the budget cycle right now. I think we're doing pretty good in water. I'm not sure exactly where we're at with wastewater. We have had some extraordinary O&M. We've had some equipment that's reached the end of its life cycle that we've had to replace. We've had some things related to maintenance that we've had to address, but we're actively working to solve those issues. And as far as where we are, break even or not, I'm not exactly sure. 25 lift stations. They're basically wastewater pumping stations. Your wastewater system is a gravity network that takes domestic wastewater from the residents and businesses. It flows by gravity to its lowest point. You have to lift it and repump it. And we treat and dispose of approximately 73 million gallons of wastewater annually. Same scenario that we're required by permit to staff our facility with licensed operators. Our current permit and flow rate and classification requires that the wastewater plant be staffed 6 hours a day, Monday through Friday, by a Class C wastewater operator or higher, and requires 2 weekend visits. As it states here, there's extensive sampling and reporting requirement to federal, state, and local regulatory agencies.
And Jamie, another leading question, because this is often something that residents ask about. Why would a wastewater bill be more expensive than your water bill? Is wastewater more expensive to treat?
Yes, it's a lot more extensive a process, and there's a lot of reporting requirements, and the monitoring of the ultimate disposal site. Not only the effluent, which is the treated wastewater, but the biosolids that are accumulated and settled out as part of the process. The disposal costs on that are more expensive. Annual budget of approximately $983,000. It would be important to note that the electric department, the water department, wastewater department, those are enterprise funds, which means they are standalone enterprises. The funds are segregated from your general fund tax revenues and not supported by tax dollars. I'm sure the finance director will get more into the explanation of that when he comes up. Our Public Works Department is responsible for the operation of the streets that belong to the city. We repair 2 miles of unpaved and 37 miles of paved city streets. And we also maintain 16 miles of unpaved county road and 9 miles of paved county road. That is through some interlocal agreements. We're actively in some discussions with the county about potential upgrades and improvements to those roads and the ultimate ownership and cost of maintenance on those roads.
So there's 16 miles we're responsible of that are county roads?
Yes, ma'am. The city entered into an interlocal agreement in '93 with the county where we did basically a road swap. They would grade a certain amount of roads for us. We would grade a certain amount of roads for them. It was basically pretty much a 50-50 proposition of about 2-point-something miles each. Since then, the total on the city side has expanded greatly, and we're not compensated by the county for those roads, and it's often a source of confusion for the citizens. They know they live in the city limits of Newberry. They assume that the road belongs to the city of Newberry, but our agreement interlocal is basic maintenance. It's not improvements, it's not paving, it's not major upgrades in addition of base. It's very basic grading, mowing, things of that nature.
That's not negotiable, I mean, we have to take care
It's
of it.
definitely negotiable.
Okay.
It's
We're in the middle of negotiating.
Just checking.
You'll hear this a lot, but it's complicated. But it is it's something that I've been working with staff on for a long time as someone who's spent a lot of the time in Newberry on a dirt road. And one of the more frequent complaints, like the blips, will be nobody's graded my road. I call the county says it's the city. I call the city says it's the county. So it's certainly something we'd love you to dive into. But we have been in conversations. I haven't had an update in a while about how those conversations are going, but they're slow. Of course, the county is saying, hey, those are all your roads. You've been maintaining them for a long time. We're saying, well, we've been maintaining them because we had this agreement, but this agreement was originally for pretty much a 2-mile swap on both sides. And since then, the county just sort of backed off and said, well, the city of Newberry is going to take care of it for us. So,
The chances of getting paid their bill, I mean, they can't even pay their
right.
own roads.
But we can tell you now how much we have spent on a yearly basis to maintain those roads, and that's what we're taking to the county and saying, hey, we've done this for you now for 20
Since
years.
93.
So it's time to renegotiate this relationship. We don't mind doing it. I don't think that's the issue. We're closer. It makes more sense. But we are spending quite a bit of money maintaining roads that we don't have to, and you deal with the complaints on it simply because, as Jamie said, nobody understands. They live in the city of Newberry. They do see our grader go up and down, but so they assume what we're the one. It is. It's very.
It is also important to note that we offer a much higher level of service than the county. The county typically grades their roads on roughly a 5 to 6 week cycle. We're currently grading our roads on roughly a 3-week cycle. And even with the 3-week grading cycle, we receive an extensive amount of complaints. A lot of that is predicated on the fact that these dirt roads haven't been improved. They basically do not have a sub-base. So even if you grade it, if you get a dry spell or you get a rain event immediately after you've graded it, it can affect the condition of the road.
Technically, we could tell those citizens, you need to call your county commissioners because it's their roads.
Yes, we could.
We could do that. I mean, not to deflect blame, but we can't, I understand that, we can't, there's nothing we can do.
And that's a great point. Here's the way it typically goes. We tell a resident that that's a county road that we maintain via contract, but we're not financially in a position to make improvements to a county road. We would make improvements to city roads, and we'd expect the county to make improvements to their roads. And you should call your county representative or the county staff, and the county staff immediately say, that's not our road, that's Newberry's road, and a resident really has no way of figuring it out, and so you end up with a resident who's just frustrated that no one will take ownership. And so it's a constant, that's generally how we lead off our meetings with the county, is us pointing at you and you pointing back at us and leaving upset residents, Newberry and Alachua County residents, is not acceptable. We gotta come to some resolution on that.
And it does make sense for us to maintain the roads. They're right there close to us. It just needs to be, we need to be compensated for that so that we can continue to provide that level of service.
Some of the other tasks that we perform in the Public Works is the maintenance of the traffic markings, signage on city streets, picking up litter and debris in the right-of-way mowing, and something that folks don't think about that often is stormwater basin maintenance. In the past, the city at one point in time used to accept all stormwater basins in new development. Currently, usually they go over to homeowners associations, but we do have quite a bit that have been deeded over to the city for maintenance, and we're responsible for the mowing, the operation of that, repairing any sinkhole damage, subsidence, erosion issues, things of that nature.
If somebody has limbs and, yard trash they want to pick up, do they just call you, or they call the city?
Well, a certain amount of yard trash is picked up by our solid waste contractor. There is requirements as to how it has to be placed roadside. If for some reason the piles do not meet the intent and language of how they have to be placed per the contract, or if they're generated by commercial activity, normally the homeowner has to contract with somebody like Waste Pro for a separate pickup. That limb pickup that's a service is part of their regular garbage services and in the price of their monthly garbage service. But they have to place it per certain standards beside the road to get it picked up at no additional cost.
And the current contract doesn't allow for yard debris from commercial enterprises. They don't pay, commercial businesses don't pay for yard debris. The recent contract that we solicited proposals for will allow commercial enterprises to pay an additional fee and get yard service.
That explains why my yard, I've been wondering, because I just put it out there, I thought they would just pick it up, and it's been there for a couple months.
It's an interesting thing that most businesses presume that the city service picks it up, and it does for residential and it does not for commercial, but we've added a provision so that commercial enterprises can. Generally, commercial services have a yard service, and the thought is they'll take it with them. The yard service contractor should take it with them. But Newberry has a lot of commercial enterprises that don't have yard services, and the proprietors do their own lawn maintenance and they stack it next to the road and it never gets picked up and it's an eyesore. So we're trying to alleviate that with our new agreement.
But typically they would call the waste management just to come pick it up and just pay them directly?
Yeah, typically today, when our new contract comes into arrangement, it won't. One of the things we try to do is we try not to send any of our customers to our contractor by telephone. That also frustrates them. It's a city service. Call us. We'll interface with Waste Pro. We'll get it resolved. And so customers are always dealing with city staff and not independent contractors.
As a side note to your issue, as part of Great American Cleanup, we had notified citizens that if they would put yard waste beside the road by Monday, that we would be picking up at no charge, the city would. So if you have yard debris piled up, it should be picked up this week. We have 4 full-time positions in the Public Works Department that perform road work, solid waste, mosquito control, cemetery duties, and we also have a contract with Florida Department of Corrections for an inmate squad and a supervisor. Annual budget is $695,000. And as we were just discussing, we provide oversight and coordination with the solid waste contractor to ensure that they're complying with the terms of the contract, and that we try to intervene and address citizen issues if there's missed pickup, if there's a problem with their cart, or problem with the contractor's performance. The contractor that we currently have has a electronic database of complaints, And if for some reason a citizen has a solid waste issue, if they contact City Hall or if they contact the staff assistants that work with me, we enter that into that database, and we can actively track to see if the problem is being resolved in a timely fashion and how many of those issues are hanging out there and the length of time it takes the contractor to address them. The majority of the annual budget for the solid waste is predicated on the cost of service with the contractor. We also perform, as I stated before, all the duties in the cemetery. We actually mark cemetery lots for interments. We actually perform the interments. We mark the cemetery for placement of headstones and coping and things of that nature, and we mow and maintain it as well. We have done a little research that we are one of the very few municipal cemetery operators that do our own interments, and would like to discuss that with the commission as part of the budgetary process. We also are responsible for the mosquito control program. We have an assessment that is billed on the utility bills to everybody that's on our utility system, and we provide mosquito control monitoring and spraying as part of that. We recently adopted some new policies and procedures to do a better job of complying with state statute as to when we spray for mosquitoes and how we justify and demonstrate to the state that we had a reason to dispense the chemical. And we're trying to educate our citizens about that part of the process, and that even though the assessment is something that goes on their utility bill monthly, and spraying typically only occurs in mosquito season, there is a cost to operate and maintain the equipment, buy chemicals, train the staff, do the reporting with the state. So even though they don't see a spray truck every month out of the year, there is a cost associated with the program.
You know, we've always done mosquito spraying. The mosquito assessment is fairly new, and the idea is that, you know, people like us that live out in the country where you're kind of on the edge, you know, we don't get that service. So we were paying for it out of the general fund. So everybody was paying for it, but only some people were getting the service. So the mosquito assessment sort of locates the people who get the service now pay for the service.
So
Well,
you wouldn't pay for it where you are.
So I don't pay for it because we're too, you need a concentrated area in order to cover the whole city. And the city's in 4 quadrants.
It's divided in 4 quadrants
Four
with
quadrants.
the state road breaking it north, south, east, and west.
Right. So you're kind of right there on the edge. You're in a neighborhood. Yeah. And you probably love it because you got all the woods behind you that breed the mosquitoes. And then, so it's, and there's a certain number of people that have to complain in a quadrant before we will go out and spray. So if somebody calls you and says, my kids are out and they're getting eaten up, tell them, well, they just need to call 6 times, 3 times.
Well, once we get to 6 complaints, on top of that, to comply with statutes, somebody with a public applicator's license, which is myself, has to go out to the area of the complaints and document that there is mosquito activity there with a landing count or with some kind of trapping. As a side note to that, and this is something I hadn't had a chance to discuss with the manager, but the County Health Department and the Florida Department of Agriculture would like to come do a presentation in early May, if possible, on mosquito control activity in the state of Florida as a whole, and some of the things that the state and the health department are doing, especially due to the Zika virus. And they would like to discuss that with the commission and clarify, you know, some of the state's responsibilities, the county's responsibilities. And as part of this program, they're going to be providing some trapping for the city at no cost. And they're going to be assisting us with some education for the citizens, and they have developed a program for the county, city of Gainesville, city of Alachua, and the city of Newberry, which are the only entities that have mosquito control department, to share information on landing counts and trapping rates and things of that nature.
The assessment, Commissioner Glanzer, it's $1 a month or $12 a year.
Some of the upcoming projects in our different departments, as you're aware, the Newberry Town Center residential and commercial construction is currently underway. We are been heavily involved with the installation of the electrical system there. Newberry Corners Phase 2 is slated to kick off shortly. Oakview Village Phase 2 is under construction. As the mayor spoke to a little earlier about the SCADA system, that includes our electric, water, and wastewater utilities. It basically monitors and controls and gives us information on how to operate the system effectively and efficiently, and predicts issues for us. And the advanced metering infrastructure project that the mayor spoke to, those are potential issues coming down the pike in the electric department. Water department, we have a current permit from FDP to make a extension of a water main to the Destiny Church site. We're currently under design and working on the permitting for the River Grant water main and wastewater extension, SCADA and controls project, and advanced metering and infrastructure and water as well. That River Grant from the Swanee River Water Management District is something that we got to install some gravity sewer lines in areas where they were served by septic tanks and private sewer lines, and to upgrade some existing water lines in that area and get them on a dedicated public utility easement instead of on private property where they're located now. Another major issue we have is the potential relocation of Lift Station 1, which is the one that's located adjacent to the football field. And we're currently in the permitting process to reconfigure some of our existing force mains on State Road 45 to facilitate development and alleviate some capacity issues with lift stations downstream. As the mayor spoke, we have done a good bit of work in our public works department in the last year and a half. We now have a road inventory that identifies every road in town, the mileage on different segments, the condition of it. We've ranked them in a classification system from Class 3 being a road that's in good shape and doesn't require anything for at least 10 years, to a Class 1 road that's substandard and requires some upgrade. And we put a potential cost to segments of each one of those roads, and we have funding dedicated from gas tax and other sources in the budget for us to select projects off of that inventory to do annually to improve the conditions of our streets.
I just have a question that is curious, that right downtown, like north of 2nd on 255th,
Yes, ma'am.
that awful dirt road right in the middle of town, I guess that's, how would you classify the importance of getting that paid, for example?
Well, one thing we did in conjunction with the inventory is you have the potential to fund certain projects out of gas tax and things like that, as I stated, but you also have the potential to get grants for areas that are potentially low and moderate income. So as part of the evaluation process, we can determine which ones we want to fund out of the gas tax revenue, which one may fit the criteria for grant money, so we can further our road paving dollars and get more projects done that way.
So who would decide if it was worthy of a grant to look into that? I mean, how does that work?
The staff will recommend priorities for funding, and we'll try to identify funding sources.
We can lobby staff?
The board will make final decisions on which projects make it into our CIP every year. That part of the general fund and our ability to have additional revenues for road paving is one of the tougher budget finds that we have. Last year, when we go for looking for grant funds, we would usually identify a community development block grant as a funding source. The last time we went to the funding cycle, though, there's a committee. It's the Citizens Advisory Task Force. They choose between whether we would want to spend grant dollars on public infrastructure like road paving, or whether we'd want to do housing improvements, which is for private property. And that committee selected housing improvements. So I think the next time we go through a CDBG grant cycle, we're going to be looking at home rehabilitation and not public roadway improvements, public infrastructure improvements.
Some of the potential projects in Public Works is, as I said, the annual paving and resurfacing projects. We did Newberry Lane here in the last funding cycle, and as part of the budget process, identified the priorities the commission has. We're also actively involved in a right-of-way reclamation, basically a pushback. There's quite a few streets in the city that they have allowed vegetation to encroach on the driving surface, and we're clearing those back to where we get full use of the right-of-way, full drainage use of the right-of-way, and there's no visual obstructions or safety issues or blind spots, and that is a project that's being spearheaded by our inmate squad. And we're fixing to enter mosquito control spraying as well.
And Mr. Mayor, if it's okay with you and Commissioner Glanzer, we're gonna lobby for a short break, eat some pizza, and then we'll get back to it.
That sounds great. We want to, I believe, our legal staff, did they provide the pizza tonight? Do we owe them? Who do we owe a thank you to for the
Huge
pizza
thanks.
tonight? Hey. Yeah. Well, whoever did, we are very appreciative.
Any further questions before we partake?